I've been thinking about that a lot as I reread the resurrection story from the Gospel of John, preparing for today. It looked really different to me this year. The section that we read today did, but also parts leading up to and following this story that we just read this morning. And the reason why is because this year in Minnesota, as we all know, our privilege and our safety has been compromised. Our immigrant neighbors, of course, have been hit the hardest, but none of us escaped. We are all recovering right now from a massive trauma. And I don't know if you have taken the time since January to read the story of the crucifixion and the resurrection, but you may hear some different echoes in the story now, as I did. In fact, let me start further back for you. As far back as the story of Lazarus that we actually read 2 weeks ago. Why did Jesus take so long to go see Lazarus? And why did his disciples not want to go at all? Because that is what happened. They really did not want to go. They were terrified. And it is because Jerusalem had become a dangerous city to be in for them. The religious authorities felt threatened by Jesus, and they decided to use their law enforcement system to consolidate power and get him out of the way. Jesus insisted on going, and of course we know that they didn't get arrested then. During the story of the raising of Lazarus, they didn't get arrested yet. That happened when they went back for Passover. Now we're up to Maundy, Thursday, and Good Friday, and the events from that part of the week. Jesus' disciples, they called ahead of time. They arranged a safe place for Passover. That is a detail that I never thought about before. Maybe they were trying to fly under the radar so that the authorities didn't know where to find them. Little did they know they had an informant in their group. Judas took the deal offered by the government, a bounty for a tip on where to find Jesus, and find him they did. They waited until they were alone in a garden, away from witnesses, away from followers, away from the crowds who would have stood between them. Unfortunately for the disciples, they didn't have cell phones or whistles, but Peter had a sword. And so when they came to arrest Jesus, Peter put them all in a very dangerous situation right away. Peter attacked. And Jesus told him to drop it, because we all know what happens when you have a weapon. I guess it has always been this way. And then Jesus was arrested. And you know what Peter did? Peter followed him. Peter followed him to the place that he was being held and questioned. And I don't think that we think hard enough about where Peter went. Peter was obviously of the same ethnic persuasion as Jesus, so much so that he could be visually and vocally identified as a Galilean. And he walks into the place where they are holding Jesus. Peter walked into the lobby of the Whipple building, and he stayed there for as long as he could. But most of the people in the courtyard of the high priest's house were not safe people. In fact, someone looks over at him and says, "Hey, aren't you from Galilee? Aren't you with him?" And of course, Peter denies that, and Peter feels such guilt and shame for all that he was not able to do. I think that is the reason why Jesus mentions this ahead of time and then makes sure to specifically forgive Peter afterwards. Because Jesus knew that there wasn't much he could have done in that circumstance, and Jesus wanted him free and continuing to take care of the community. And then we have Pilate. Pilate, who in the Western Church has been handed down as a legacy of a toothless and ineffective politician. A man who had the luxury of having God speak to his wife in a dream. Pilate got a direct message telling him to do the right thing. And yet he made excuses and he washed his hands of the situation. He does nothing to save anyone, certainly not the right thing. He was too concerned with public opinion. He was too concerned with the balance of power that he shared with the other corrupt leaders to care at all that they were willing to sacrifice the lives of others. They were willing to destroy families. They were willing to destroy communities in order to maintain their power and their money. And they do. Because Jesus dies as a criminal by capital punishment. They condemned and they sacrificed him because his power, his presence, the way that he lived and moved in the world, the miracles that he performed, the community that he was building were a direct threat to the power that was drawn from oppression and theft and greed and a monopoly of religious power married to the oppressive power of the state. That is threatened when God comes into the world because it is shown to be rooted in evil and sin. Of course, it made them look bad when Jesus fed those who they left hungry and healed those that they left sick and struggling on the margins of society, because they were so twisted up in a system that elevated them above others through oppression of their own people and compliance with the empire, that when God came and walked among them, all they saw was a threat. They didn't even recognize him. And so what did they do to Jesus, the one who came to save us? They did their worst. In the end, they used the biggest weapon that they have. Death. That was it. That was the worst that they could do. But that doesn't work against God. Because the power that God wields can overcome even death. Because the power of God is to bring life even out of death. The power of God is that which overcomes the very worst that they tried to throw at it. But even after seeing all of the signs, even after watching Jesus heal the sick and raise people from the dead, no one among his followers was quite expecting the resurrection. When Mary went to that garden, and that, I have to apologize, that was my proofreading error. That was what we skipped. Mary goes to the garden, and she tells the other disciple, the body is gone. But when Mary went to the garden, she was not expecting to find resurrection. She was expecting to find the consequences of the cycle of sin and death that they had all been caught up in. That was what she expected, but that is not what she found. She found life instead. Inexplicable, unexplainable, irresistible life. The resurrection that changed everything, that invalidated and made useless the worst of the weapons of the enemy. A true change and a victory. And who saw it first? It was the ones on the ground. It was the ones out there doing the work. Whether at that moment Mary had been able to keep her faith in God's future, or the vision that Jesus had painted for them all of new life, we don't know. But it also doesn't matter, because Jesus came to her anyway. Jesus came to her with resurrection, with new life, with a truth that would be more important than any of the lies that she had ever been fed and any of the violence that she had ever been exposed to. That would wipe all of that away by bringing a salvation, by bringing a healing that was deeper and more profound and more lasting than anything that had come before. It was the people who were out doing the work that Jesus appeared to, but it was also the people who were in danger. Because what comes right next? Jesus also came to the disciples who were in hiding. Right after our reading ends, it says, the next day the disciples were together with their doors locked for fear of their leaders. And Jesus came and stood among them, and he said, "Peace be with you." And they were overjoyed when they saw the Lord. They were overjoyed to experience resurrection. If you didn't know this, it wasn't that long ago that this church was meeting behind locked doors, was it? I can tell you I thought a lot about what flimsy protection a door lock would be against people wielding the power of the state, but thanks be to God, it's something that we never had to think about. And I'm even more thankful that door locks are flimsy protection against resurrection life, because Jesus stood among them. He came into that room, just as he does today behind every locked door in this city, in this country. And he comes today with the same joy and courage and wonder that he did on that first resurrection day. Because this is where resurrection happens. Resurrection happens where the forces of sin and death have done their worst. Because you know what? Their worst is not good enough, and it never will be. Resurrection happens because they have lost the fight. Because there is no place that we can be. There is no locked door so secure. There is no detention center so remote from your home and family. There is no hopeless situation so hopeless that we can be separated from the love of God. For I am convinced that neither death nor life, nor angels nor demons, nor the present nor the future, nor any powers, nor height nor depth, nor anything else in all of creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus. We can rejoice in that. And our rejoicing today, our proclamation of resurrection, is an act of trust in God. It is an act of faith that the signs of resurrection we see in the world are signs of resurrection. They aren't just things getting better temporarily while we wait for the other shoe to drop, the other shoes to drop. And I know that it's hard. That's not healthy, but I know sometimes it's easier to live in that space. But that is a space for burnout, and it's a space where trauma collects, and it's not what God wants for us. God comes with healing, and God comes to everyone. I know you've all heard this in the past couple months. Everyone has said that no one is coming to save us but us. Something that's been going around the Twin Cities. A way to motivate ourselves and bring us together. And yes, that absolutely applies in the situation that we were in right now. And we were right to take that power into our own hands. But this is not something that we believe about our God. Because we know that not only did God come down 2,000 years ago to save us, but God is here with us now. And God was here with us throughout this whole ordeal because God is always coming to save us. God is the strength of love between us. God is the courage that makes discipleship possible. God is the Spirit that binds us together and continues to bring us life and joy and healing in all circumstances. And God is the one who brings life out of death and is at work even now. Amen.